I am not paid nor sponsored in any way to create this video. Now, I love this foundation paper. If you do use, I mean, you can do, it's totally up to you. You can use regular printer paper. But what I find is it's a little bit trickier when it comes to taking the paper out. It's not too bad when you stitching over it, but when it comes to taking the paper out. So I use this foundation paper. And basically, it's a little bit like a really thin construction paper or newspaper kind of paper. And it's really easy to take them out afterwards. So you're not going to be sat there for like 10 minutes or whatever. You're literally going to be able to take that out. This is my pattern printed on that foundation paper. So it's picked them colours up. Alongside it, I'll just be using my diagram as well, just to remind me which is the lighter yellow and which is the darker yellow. You can see it, but once you get going, you can easily make a mistake. And I made a mistake yesterday when I was doing another one. So just try not to be doing something while you're actually doing this. Maybe just listen to some music rather than watching TV. You need a little bit concentration. So just remember, this is a diagram only. This is not the end version. This is the correct size that we need here. So this is a diagram and this is the pattern. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to take my scissors, not my fabric scissors, but my regular scissors, and I'm going to cut all the way around this. You don't want to cut this off because that is your seam allowance. So we're just going to cut all this. This is very scrap friendly, by the way. Do this totally out of your scraps. So when you look at your pattern, they're all numbered and you're going to follow every single number as it's shown. Another tip with foundation paper piecing is that you don't want to skimp on the fabric. You kind of want to, but sometimes it depends on how the fabric is being flipped around. You can sometimes make an error by not having quite enough fabric. So you're always going to use the light to make sure that you're covering these individual sections correctly. Another tip is if this is your first time, use just all solid fabrics, because sometimes you might put one the wrong side up and then you're going to have to take it out. We're going to have to use really small stitches on this because it's like a mini quilt, so there's less room for error. So I highly recommend that you do it on plain fabric just so you can get a feel of it and then work your way to some sort of a pattern. So my first two fabrics are A1. So if you are using a solid, this is going to be right sides up. So make sure that first piece is right sides up. And then I'm going to be using A2. And that is going to be right sides down. Now, when you're doing foundation paper piecing, you're always working on the reverse of the block. So you're going to have to hold that into place. And then you're going to sew across on this A2 here. When you bring it up to the light, you will be able to see the line here. And you want to be 1/4 of an inch over that line. And then we're going to stitch it into place. Before we start, we want to make sure that that needle is landing right in the center. And right here, I can tell it needs to move over just a couple to the right. So I'm just going to move it. And on my Baby Lock Soprano, it would be this stitch, this button, sorry. So you've got to move it over to make sure that it's central. Now that's right central to this little line here. To make our stitch length shorter, I'm going to do it about 1.6. The fabrics are on the back and I'm going to turn my work over and I'm just going to line my presser foot up with the start of A1 and A2 and sew just down the line that it's showing. The complicated part of this is probably just the start. I'm using a Microtex 9014 sewing needle and I've also got some regular Gutermann polyester all-purpose thread in my sewing machine, and then I'm just going to start stitching and I'm going to back stitch as well and then go forward. Now the trick of this is keep your sewing machine on a slow stitch. You don't want to go fast because you're only taking short lines and it's easy just to make a mistake. So once we get to the end of this one, I'm going to back stitch. And then that's it for that first part. So I'm going to take that off the machine. I highly recommend just keeping these threads nice and clean. So just trim these away. And then your work is going to be on the back. And clip this away. And I'm going to fold this up. And another tool that I like to use is this. So I don't want to be up and down all the time with the iron. So I am just going to press this seam roller just to fold that seam over. Now that's the first part done. Now we're going to go on to the next part. So when you fold everything back, just make sure that nothing's folded over. Everything's nice and flat. And then we're going to look at A3 here. And what we're going to do is just, it doesn't have to be precise, just fold it over where that A3 is. And then you're going to cut this off at 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to take my rotary cutter and just cut that off. And now what you're going to do is you're going to take your next colour, which is grey. And you're going to put a piece of grey over the top here. I have some pre-cuts that are 2.5 by 2.5 as well that I did, so I could just grab and go as I keep doing it. Now you're going to hold these together and then you're going to turn it around and sew that A3 down. Doing foundation paper piecing is probably one of the most easiest and gratifying things that you could possibly do, and it's really not that difficult. So just like doing a jigsaw puzzle out of fabric. It's probably a little bit too slow there. There you go. And then back stitch. Oh, remember to back stitch. And I'm going to keep a small pair of scissors here so I can just cut these threads right at the sewing machine. You can do everything right at the sewing machine and you don't have to keep getting up and moving. So this is a section we just did. I'm going to pull that back and then get my little press. And then have a look at what letter we're working on next. So we just did A3, so we now need A4. So what we're going to do again is we're going to fold this back, doesn't have to be precise, cut away 1/4 of an inch, find out what our next colour is, and mine is a white, so I'm going to get a piece of white fabric. I'm going to put it right up to where it should go, and you can check whether that's enough fabric in that just by looking at lifting it up and putting it up to a light source, or lifting it up a little, and you can see that is absolutely perfect. And I'm going to turn it around, holding everything into place, and then stitch that down. Sew into place. And fold back. Now I need A5. Take off 1/4 of an inch. It's another white section. Hold it up just to see that I've got it positioned well. Forward, reverse, forward, coming to the end, reverse, forward, flip and press. 1/4 inch. White fabric. Stitch. Flip. Seven. Trim. Check the colour. White. And stitch. Flip. Press. Turn around. 8/8 grey. Trim. Face down, check placement, stitch. Flip. Press. Turn around. Just make sure you're not catching anything as you're doing that. A9. Trim. Grey fabric. Double check that everything is going to be sewn where it needs to. Take this to the sewing machine and stitch. Flip. Press. A10. Trim. Fabric. So that one's not quite big enough, so I can't use this one. I'm just going to use this one. Double check again and stitch. When all your threads trimmed and tidy, flip back, press, turn over, A11, trim. Line your grey fabric up, make sure it's going to fit, and then stitch. Flip over and press. A12 is like the darker yellow. Flip over, trim, place the fabric and stitch. Flip over, press, 13, trim, dark yellow, and sew. Flip back, press, A14, fold over, trim, flip back over, dark yellow, and stitch, flip, A15, trim, dark light yellow and sew, flip and press. Just watch again that you're not folding anything over as you go. You're going to go to A16, trim, got this light yellow, we are going to place that on, flip it back, make sure it's covering everything and stitch, flip back, press, then we want 17, trim, place a light yellow down, you always double check and stitch into place, flip back, press, (18), trim, light yellow, stitch into place, double check, fold back, press, (19), fold over, trim, light yellow, double check in the light and sew, flip back, press, now I need to find 20, 20 is all the way up here, fold it back, trim, (20) is white, place it down, double check that everything's in line and sew, fold back and press, 21, trim, and yes, I just managed to cut myself with a rotary cutter, so don't do that. Then take the white piece and stitch into place, open it up and press, (22), trim, be careful, place a white piece of fabric, check it's going to cover and it does, lift up and press, (23), trim. You know what? I'm just going to use my scissors. How about that? Take your next white section and place, double check and stitch. Fold over, press, ooh, 24 is up here and it's a grey section, fold it back, trim, place your fabric and stitch, fold back, press, (25) is right next to it, trim, I'm going to place pale yellow down and stitch, flip back, press, and there's a really tiny teeny tiny grey section here. Place and stitch. So that was all 24, 25 and 26 all in the same place, and I'm going to press that down and then flip back over. So we want to find 27, which is here, fold over and trim, flip over and press, $28, pale yellow, flip over and press, and there's this little tiny grey section again. Fold this back and trim, and sew, fold back, press, $30, trim, grey section, stitch, flip back, press, $31, light yellow, trim, put into place, stitch, flip back, press, itty bitty 32, trim, paste a small bit of grey there and stitch, flick back, press, last corner, 33, trim, turn around, dark grey, place, make sure it's all going to cover, flip back, press, light yellow, trim, check it can all fit on, so flick back, press, fold over for that little bitty 35 and trim, take a grey piece, make sure it'll all fit on and stitch into place, flip back, press, turn the unit over, make sure nothing is folded on itself, and take in a rotary cutter, and then what you're going to do, you don't follow this line here, this is the seam allowance. We want to follow along that outside edge of that square, and then what I'm going to do is trim everything off and do the same thing with the next 3 sides. I'm going to turn it over and that will reveal our nice work. So what we're going to do now is take all this paper out. This paper is going to come out so much easier. It almost like it's perforated everything. It's great. So it's much easier to take out than the photocopy paper. So it's easy to stitch through, it's easy to tear off, you can print on it, you can run it through your printer, is absolutely perfect. Highly recommend it if you're going to be doing a lot of this foundation paper piecing. I have taken off all of my papers and I'm going to put the side borders on, right sides together, and sew 1/4 inch. Open these out, take to the iron and press the top and the bottom borders and attach them right sides together. Open this out and press. I use a quilt stand to display my mini quilt, and then I do a casing on the back. So I'm just going to take this out and show you. So it has this here just to put your casing through. So let's organise the casing. You're going to fold the raw seam back 1/2 inch on both sides and then go to your iron and press. I recommend stitching this down because it gets in your way. You're going to fold in half, 1/2 inch, and then do on the same on the other side and press. While you're doing one, do the same thing with the other one. And then from here, just fold it in half and just make sure that both of them are kind of more or less the same size. And when you fold it in half, you're going to stitch right at the bottom here. Go ahead and do a little bit of quilting on this, but just be careful when it comes to going too far up here, because we're going to want to put this casing on. So if you are hanging it up, then you have something to hang it from. So you don't want to close all this up and not be able to attach this to the back, because you don't want this stitch to come all the way to the front. If you are a Baby Lock Soprano user, this is stitch number 38 that I used. So before we pin it back, we are going to trim off this part here, and we will need to trim the sides off as well. Take whatever you want to be the top and fold this all over so we don't get it caught when we're sewing. Pin it so we don't accidentally catch it. We do need to be at least 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch away from the top, because that is where your binding is going to be folded over. So I recommend that you are just above this inch mark at putting your casing on. And you want some clearance again on the binding on this side. Now you're going to attach this. They want to be parallel. And you're going to do it right as close to this casing as you possibly can, because you want the wire to still be able to go through the casing. So you'll sew one on first and sew the other on afterwards. So also don't close the ends up, obviously, because we want the wire to go in between here. Now that is complete. I can fold this back up and I can take this end off as well here. One jelly roll strip works just perfectly for this. So, and this is 2.5 inch wide. I always like to do my binding 2.5 inch wide. Doing a binding strip on something this small is very fiddly. So we are going to leave enough for us. And we're going to start right over here. So we're going to sew this corner up, but we're going to leave all of this so we've got room to play with later on. I sewed all the way off the end of our little mini quilt. You're going to lift this up and you're going to fold it back on itself. I've done so many quilting tutorials on binding. If you want something just on binding, then just have a search on my channel and you will find it. So now we are going to start a little bit down from the top, because you don't want to include that fold, and you're going to sew all the way down. When it comes to that last corner where you're meeting up again, you just want to do a very little bit stitched up. So only like finish off this corner section here and stop. Find the center of your mini quilt. So you're going to fold it over, press a crease, flip the right sides over, and you are going to cut that off right where that central line was. A love, love, love this tool. So I always use a 2.5-inch binding. So I am going to place it on here like so. And I'm going to take the left hand side and I'm going to fold it over. And then where that fold is, I am going to cut. Now, you're going to do this right sides together. This may need folding over slightly. Open it out and open this side out. And you're going to grip it. Apologies, I haven't left us a great ton of room here, have I? So basically I flipped it over because it was easier to work on the other side. I am going to draw a line going all the way across here. And you may have to take your clip out. Just don't move the fabric and mark them 2 marks. Take over the sewing machine and sew. You're going to trim this up. Just removes all the bulk. And then it's going to be the perfect length for your little mini quilt. So you're going to take this back over to the sewing machine and you're going to stitch the rest of this down. Once again, I just recommend moving all these threads out of our way. We're just going to start folding all of our binding to the back of our mini quilt. Hand bind your binding to the back. I hope you've enjoyed watching this quilt along. Don't forget to leave a comment. It really helps the algorithm when you do that. Subscribe. I have over 500 videos now on quilting and sewing. And don't forget to like. And I'll see you in the next tutorial. Bye bye.